Um, Even though it sounds like it would be really perfect, Who Killed Amanda Palmer is not a concept record at all. It's a collection of songs that spans like almost 10 years. I wrote the oldest one when I was, I think, 22 or 23, and I'm 32 now. And there's, there was an idea back in the day, about 3 years ago, that I was just going to step aside and make a solo piano record. Just piano and voice, and I was gonna have a teeny little budget and maybe even do it in my apartment on my piano at home with a local engineer, maybe in a studio or something like that. And I was all set to do that when Ben Folds wrote an email to the Dresden Dolls website just saying that he was a fan, and I got to talking to him, and he asked if he could produce my solo record. And as soon as I said yes to that, it turned from a project that I thought was going to maybe take 3 weeks into taking about 2 years. I have this filmmaking collaborator named Michael Pope who worked on a lot of the Dresden Dolls videos and made our first DVD. And he and I, we love working together, and we wanted to do something really epic with my first record. So we got the idea of, instead of putting all of our resources into one huge video for one song, we decided to break it up and make 6 different videos for 6 tracks on the record and just release them gradually leading up to the release of the actual record. And it was an old idea. It was something that we had hoped to do for the first Dresden Dolls record, and in fact one of the first things we did when we got signed by the label is we went in with all these crazy ideas that we had, and one of the ideas is there were 12 tracks on the first Dolls record, and we said we'd love to make a really, low budget, crazy DIY video for each song, and that went away, but we ended up finally getting our fantasy with this record. And the idea behind it was to do performance-driven videos. So, we sort of looked at our history together, and we looked at the Dresden Dolls videos and what didn't work about them and what didn't work for him and what didn't work for me, and we said, what does work is Pope as kind of like a really rough and tumble self-taught filmmaker, and me as a sort of a rough and tumble self-taught piano player and performer. And we said, let's just keep things really, really simple, no elaborate plots, no extra bullshit, no tons of costumes and tons of changes and tons of story. Let's just find a strong idea and a performance and have the camera capture it. And that's basically what we did. I mean, we went off on a couple little tangents, but mostly we stuck to that, and it is the most fun that I've ever had making videos since I started doing this job. I am usually inspired to write by things that are frustrating me. And I think that's typical of a lot of songwriters. It's, for some reason, darkness and sadness and frustration and anger are really good musical fodder for a lot of people and a lot of bands. And, there's definitely a place in the world for John Denver and the Monkees and stuff like that. But personally, the music I always connected to as a kid, and as a teenager especially, was the sort of the more cathartic music that sounded like it was coming, out as a way for this artist to come to terms with this incredible loss or grief or frustration or anger. And a lot of my stuff is still like that, although I do feel on the solo record it's not as extreme as the Dresden Dolls stuff. I think that there was a point in my songwriting a long time ago, especially when I was a teenager, where I felt like I just had to completely scream at the audience in order to get my point across. And as I as I, you know, as I perform more and more, I realize that that's just my own hang-up. I don't actually have to do that. It's still fun to do it every once in a while, but if you do it for 2 hours straight, it actually, you know, it's sort of like the message gets lost in the noise. So, but as far as where the songs come from, I think, you know, there's songs around me all the time. Like, I'm constantly inspired by everything I do and see, and I get a lot of ideas, but I'm not the disciplined kind of person who could say I'm going to sit down and write for 2 hours a day. I'm just like, I'm way too lazy to do that. So usually songs come in a random, accidental way because I happened to take the time that day to write that idea. And if I did have the discipline to sit down and write songs for 2 hours a day, every day, I would just have a whole lot of songs and I wouldn't know what to do with them, probably. That's kind of one of those self-policing things that I'm kind of glad I'm a lazy songwriter, because the way things work, you don't want to put out 5 records a year. It's just like, that would make things really complicated. So as long as I write 12 songs a year and they're good, then I'm pretty much on schedule.